Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to follow us, by the way, on Twitter at twitter.com/UNC Knowledge. Twitter.com/UNC Knowledge. A classicist and military historian, Victor Davis Hanson, is a fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. He's the author of many books, including, recently, A War Like No Other, How the Athenians and Spartans Fought the Peloponnesian War. Robert Baer spent 20 years in the Central Intelligence Agency as a field officer covering the Middle East. Mr. Baer is now a journalist and author. His latest book, The Devil We Know, Dealing with the New Iranian Superpower. Victor, Bob, thank you for joining us. Segment 1, Will Iran or Won't It? An October report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, quote, Iran has sufficient information to design and produce a workable implosion nuclear device, close quote. Do you buy that? Iran is now capable of producing nuclear weapons?
Oh, I think absolutely.
No,
I think,
without any doubt.
without any doubt. I think they're very close. They could move very quickly on this. We haven't even seen the beginning of their programs, their covert capacity to pick stuff up in Eastern Europe, in Russia. They could move very quickly if they wanted to.
Victor, you buy that as well?
Yeah, I think the key word was a nuclear weapon, because I don't know how much enriched uranium and at what quality it is that would allow them to produce a series of weapons. Remember, the United States, after the Nagasaki bomb, really didn't have an arsenal of atomic weapons for 6 months. So I don't know, they might get one, or they might get perhaps two, but I think that's why it's so important that we watch these deals where they're offering to have other outside people, France or Russia, enrich uranium, because I think they're having a little bit of problems to get a series of weapons.
Can I question, who knows what? You're a former CIA operative. You're a military historian. How do you form your opinions about what's actually going on? You're doing more than reading the New York Times.
I think everybody...
In other words, can you form really good opinions on what's publicly available information?
I think you can, and I think
you can project. I mean, okay. I had the advantage of seeing classified reporting on Iran, and frankly, it wasn't good. We've been out of that country since '79.
How recently did you see?
Until December '97, when I left the CIA.
Right.
I followed it fairly closely
right.
From the sidelines. It's not very good, and the Iranians are very good at procuring banned materials very easily, and they're very smart people, and they are capable of making a bomb, and they have been going back to really the 70s. What the important thing is they've chosen not to, and that's really one of the key questions.
Let me quote you, Bob. You write in The Devil We Know, quote, right now the Iranians don't need a nuclear bomb. The Iranians are too smart to risk the gains they've made in Iraq and Lebanon by forcing the issue. So they have the ability to produce a nuclear weapon. They could do so quickly, but they won't?
I think they're buying time. They're trying to remain a radical revolutionary power and yet get themselves at the international negotiating table. And the way to do this is keep on letting information out about their bomb, saying they're going to do it, backing off, and they are trying to work their way, I don't think they're going to make it, into the G20 by simply forcing our hands. That's my opinion.
Victor, what do you think they're up to?
Oh, I think it depends on what Iran we look at. The present-day Iran, I think that they feel that the Iraqi democracy didn't implode like they thought it would. And because of
after this recent election?
Exactly. And
they thought they were about to lose the regime thought it was about to get overturned?
Well, I think that the idea that Iraq is next door and it's actually working in somewhat stable fashion, and then you have a large dissident movement within Iran, and then Lebanon didn't become just entirely a Hezbollah enclave, and that Lebanon still survived as a quasi-constitutional state. And their way of looking, Manichaean way of looking at the world, we say, well, they're very powerful and they won and Iraq empowered, but in their way of thinking, I think they look at Lebanon, they look at the Sunni states that are actually more favorable to Israel stealthily than they are Iran. They look at what's going on in Iraq and they think, my gosh, we are in an unstable position, and maybe this Russian route and a bomb or two will allow us to do what Pakistan has done, give us some autonomy. I don't think that they feel that they're in a very stable position. I don't think they are either. I think the regime is shaky. I think it's got a lot of...
Who actually runs Iran? We've got a population of about 70 million people, and a very, I was going to say a strange form of government, because it's so, at least as far as I'm aware, it's dissimilar to any, certainly it has no parallel in the West, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't really have any parallel elsewhere in the Muslim world. This strange theocracy, you've got an elected president, an elected legislator elected from slates approved by but the mullahs seem to have enormous...
That changed on the 12th of June. You know, I think this is a bit of an exaggeration, but there was a military coup. And the country is being run by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Which is about 100,000 strong, is that right?
It's a little bit more than that. But so you've got the Besiege, which there is their reserves that came out in the street. And the problem with
the reserves are several million?
Yeah, they can be several million. They can put 2 million people in uniform very quickly. But the Besiege are volunteers, and they're being integrated into the Revolutionary Guards, fully integrated. But the point is, the commanders, and especially the new defense minister, came through what's called the Quds Force, which has a long history of shedding blood, particularly American blood. The Quds Force was responsible for the 2 bombings in Argentina. It was responsible for blowing up the Marines in Beirut in '83, and on and on. Now that these people are fully in control and have made Rafsanjani back down, as well as Karoubi, who ran for elections this time, and Mousavi, is what are these people going to do? Are they reformed revolutionaries, or are they still radicals? And that, we don't know yet so far.
Okay. Segment 2. What does Tehran think it's doing? We've actually touched on this. Iran, slightly bigger than the state of Alaska, population about 70 million, religion Shia Muslim, resources, vast deposits of oil and natural gas. Robert Baer in The Devil We Know, quote, "What's critical to understand is that Iran today has an unshakable belief in its right to empire. It means to achieve this through proxy warfare and control over oil supplies." That's 2 sentences and 2 assertions. Let's take them one at a time. An unshakable belief in a right to empire.
Do you want me to say it in politically incorrect?
Yeah, please.
They think they are superior, the Iranians do, to the Arabs.
So there's an ethnic overlay here.
It's huge.
And
they look at the ethnics as Bedouin, as backward, and they look at their civilization as more advanced than even the West. They'll go through their old empires. They'll go through any number of things, and they think they're a superior culture. I think we're talking about a people, and there's a certain amount of exaggeration. And they also look at the chaos around them. On Sunday, there was a bombing that killed 41 in Sistan province that was done by a suicide bomber, and they look at the mess in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and they look at Iraq, the suicide bombings there, and they see the barbarians at the gate. And they do not intend to let those barbarians cross the border. And if they have to become aggressive to stop the barbarians, which they look at, and again, this is an exaggeration, as Sunni Muslims, they will. And they'll do it through proxies, they'll do it through irregular warfare, asymmetric warfare, if you like.
The Persian proportion of the population of Iran itself
51%.
is 51%. So, and it's remarkable how fragmented the remaining 49% is. You've got about 24% Azeri, as I recall, and everybody else is in single digits. There are a dozen other ethnic groups that are in single digits.
They're sitting on a volcano.
Yeah.
So the 51% Persians say to themselves, we can control these people in our own borders. Why should we can control them in a wider empire too? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely.
We know how to control
when it comes to the Arabs, they can. When is the last time the Arabs in the Gulf fought a war? Never.
And that's
not
because
in modern history, because they're not organized to do it.
I think
you accept all this?
more or less. I think that the problem with Iran is that it's an imploding society. It has these minority problems. It has these rivalries. It's got now a constitutional system emerging in Iraq. It's got this problem in Lebanon. It's not liked by the Arab countries. It's got the Europeans in this Orwellian situation where they're on the right side of us now. Sarkozy pushing us. I never thought in my lifetime I would see an Iranian president lecture an American president.
French president lecture.
Excuse me, French president. But I think what the problem is for us is that we've got this regime in there that wants to tell the Muslim world that the Shia and the Persian, who have been the minority and less distinguished, are the real inheritors of Muslim supremacy, and that they are the people who will deal with the Zionist entity, and that they're willing, as Rafsanjani said years ago, to lose a sizable number of their population. But to us, we think this is crazy, this is surreal. I think it is. I don't think they're serious. But 65 years after the Holocaust, you can't expect a small Jewish state, which is, as I think, I've never found the documentation of that statement, but someone, the widely quoted one-bomb state is what Iranian supposedly said about Israel, that it was a one-bomb state.
Meaning it would take one bomb to
Yeah,
obliterate
I don't think that's
Israel.
quite true myself. A 20-kiloton bomb wouldn't destroy all of Israel. But nevertheless,
It
if
would
65
leave a
years after the Holocaust, you can't expect the state here to sit there and just say to themselves, Ahmadinejad, Rafsanjani, all these people are just trying to chest thump because they're Shia and they're Persian and they want to tell the Arab world they're the real tough Muslim. So that's what the problem is, that because in nuclear poker, lunacy is an advantage. And that's what they're trying to convey, and we think it's lunacy, but we don't know.
Daniel Pipes, quote, Iran today is reminiscent of the Soviet Union in the 1970s. The regime is brutal and aggressive, but hollow. Bob?
I don't think it's hollow. I mean, it's not hollow in the sense that, you know, it's going to collapse like the Soviet Union. We shouldn't liken.
We have Putin, as far as we can tell, because now Russia is free and people get in there and conduct public opinion polls. We view Putin as a very difficult, disagreeable character, but there's no doubt he commands the support of well over half the population of Russia. Does the regime in Iran command the support of a significant portion of the population?
We are not in a pre-revolutionary state in Iran. There's no signs of it. I think we're seeing Takfiri Sunni fundamentalism on the edges. I think we're seeing a threat coming in from Pakistan. There's going to be a lot more bombs going off, but there's no sign that there's going to be a velvet revolution or an insurgence by the Azeris would be key, for instance. The state is too powerful, too brutal, and too capable of controlling Iran right now.
I have a question here that was submitted by Twitter from somebody who calls himself UK Manchild. Strange name, but a good question. Should the United States have supported the protesters, the dissidents, in the after effects of the current Iranian revolution? You're suggesting.
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Look,
It sounds as though you're suggesting Obama got it about right. This was the wrong time to push.
Karoubi and Mousavi
Give us a sentence on each of them.
were directly involved in blowing up the Marines in the U.S. Embassy in 1983. They have blood on their hands. These are not people that we can in any way trust. They have made it appear they've transformed themselves into some sort of green revolution, but they haven't. There is no alternative in Iran that we can identify that should come to power to replace Khamenei and Rafsanjani, that I can identify.
Well, I think the question is, were all the million people behind Mousavi? I think it was more like people who went out in the streets in '79 and said that they were for Khomeini, but they were for Bani Sadr, or they were for a socialist-type European state. So what I'm suggesting is maybe it would have been counterproductive for George Bush to do it, but this is part to support the people in the street in Tehran. It would have been tarred them with the Bush brush. But 53% of the Americans voted for Barack Obama because he was the promised transcendent candidate that appealed over the heads of governments and political leaders. So it seemed to me that he was in a very unique position of not supporting Mousavi, but saying to the Iranian people, we support your legitimate concerns over constitutional government, and do a lot more rather than wait. What he ended up resembling was an old-style Jim Baker realist that was saying, let's see who wins. Whoever wins, if it's Tiananmen Square again, we do not want to be on the side of the losers. So it didn't look good, and it sort of bothered our Sunni allies as well, and it bothered a lot of people in the world. And people like Barack Obama, who talk about human rights and idealism and make fun of the old ideological blinkers that we had. They shouldn't be on the wrong side of history. I agree with Robert. Musawi's a thug, but the people who were in the street who said that they were supported him were not thugs.
Segment 3, what is to be done? And what is to be done by the United States? So
We have a big problem that we haven't discussed, and that's Russia, because in Russia's way of thinking, it's a win-win-win situation to encourage Iran to get the bomb, and we don't want to confront that. So we had this embarrassing situation with the quid pro quo of selling out the Poles and the Czechs